Bullies pick on an old cowboy, not knowing he's a legendary marksman. They laughed when the old cowboy walked into the dust-choked town of Red Hollow, a town that had forgotten honor the same way it had forgotten rain, his boots worn thin, his coat faded by decades of sun and sorrow, his silver beard hiding scars earned long before most men there had been born, and no one noticed the way his eyes moved first, slow and calm, measuring distance, counting men, memorizing exits, because bullies never look at eyes, they only look for weakness, and Red Hollow was ruled by three such men, Cole Branson and his brothers, loud, cruel, young, drunk on borrowed courage and cheap whiskey, men who kicked dogs for fun and charged widows double, and when they saw the old cowboy take a seat near the saloon wall, resting his hat on his knee like a man with nowhere left to go, they decided he would be tonight's entertainment, so Cole swaggered over, spurs jingling like mockery, slapped the old man's hat from his hands, and the room exploded in laughter as the hat hit the floor, dust clinging to it like memory, and the old cowboy bent slowly to pick it up, hands steady, heart quieter than the grave, because he had learned long ago that rage wastes bullets, and Cole leaned close enough for whiskey breath to sting, calling him Grandpa, asking if he'd lost his way to the cemetery, shoving him back into the chair as the crowd watched, some amused, some afraid, none willing to intervene, and the old cowboy said nothing, because silence was once his greatest weapon, and the silence stretched so tight it hummed, broken only when one brother tipped over the old man's water, letting it soak into the dirt, laughing that it was the most action the relic had seen in years, and still the old cowboy did not react, because his mind had drifted backward, to a different saloon, 40 years earlier, when his name alone had emptied rooms, when men crossed streets to avoid his shadow, when he had been known as Elias Crow, the hawk of the plains, the fastest and deadliest marksman the frontier had ever whispered about, a man who could shoot the rope off a hanging man's neck without grazing skin, or put a bullet through a playing card edge on at 50 paces, a man who had survived ambushes, wars, betrayals, and the death of everyone he loved, until killing no longer felt like victory but like theft from his own soul, and that was why he had vanished, buried his name, broken his guns, and aged himself into invisibility. But bullies have a way of waking ghosts, and when Cole kicked his cane aside and told him to crawl for it, something changed, not in the old man's body but in the air itself, a pressure like a storm about to break, and the bartender felt it first, hands shaking as he whispered for them to stop, because he had seen something in the old cowboy's posture, something he remembered from stories his father told by firelight, and the old man finally spoke, his voice low, calm, tired, saying, "Son, pick up the cane," and the laughter came harder, crueler, until one brother grabbed the cane and snapped it across his knee, throwing the pieces at the old man's feet, and for the first time Elias Crow stood, slowly, deliberately, joints creaking like old leather, and when Cole shoved him again, expecting him to fall, he didn't, because legends don't fall, they wait, and Elias turned, eyes locking onto Cole's. And in that moment Cole felt it, the sudden cold, the animal instinct screaming danger, but pride is louder than instinct, so he raised his fist, never seeing the movement that followed, never seeing how the old man's hand moved not fast, but precise, striking a nerve, twisting a wrist, disarming him of violence itself, dropping him to his knees gasping as if the wind had been shot out of his lungs, and the saloon went silent, because bullies are brave only in noise. And Elias looked around the room, at the frightened faces, the complicit ones, the ones who would later swear they'd always known something was different about him, and he said quietly, "I came here to rest, not to teach," and he picked up his hat, brushed it clean, and walked out into the dying sunlight, leaving Cole on the floor, humiliated, wounded not in body but in reputation, and reputation is blood in towns like Red Hollow, and as Elias stepped onto the street, he felt it, the old pull, the past rising like a loaded gun, and he knew this wasn't over, because bullies don't forget humiliation, they answer it with violence, and somewhere behind him, a man ran for a rifle, while the legend everyone thought was dead walked calmly toward the livery, unaware that by nightfall, Red Hollow would remember exactly who Elias Crow was, and if you're enjoying this kind of powerful, cinematic storytelling where the quietest man hides the loudest past, make sure night fell over Red Hollow like a loaded revolver finally cocked, the sky dark and starless as if even heaven didn't want to watch what was coming, and Elias Crow felt it in his bones as he sat alone in the livery stable, the smell of hay and horses mixing with memories he had spent a lifetime trying to outrun, because humiliation turns cruel men desperate, and desperate men reach for guns, and sure enough word traveled fast through the town that the bold cowboy had shamed Cole Branson in front of everyone, broken his pride without throwing a punch that could be answered by the law, and Cole was not the kind of man who swallowed shame. He chewed it into bullets, and as Elias carefully unwrapped the oilcloth bundle he had sworn never to open again, the one hidden beneath the saddle of a horse he no longer claimed as his own, the weight of the revolver inside felt both familiar and heavy with consequence, an old companion he had buried along with his real name, because once upon a time that gun had sung death across the plains, and men who heard its song never heard another sound again, and Elias whispered a quiet apology to the horse, to the night, to himself, because he already knew how this would end, and outside the stable shadows moved, boots scraping dirt, hushed voices filled with liquor, courage and vengeance, and Cole Branson gathered half a dozen men, each armed, each eager to prove something, telling them the old man was nothing, just a lucky relic, and that tonight Red Hollow would be reminded who ruled it. But even as Cole spoke, doubt gnawed at him, because he couldn't forget the way the old man's eyes had looked through him, not at him, as if measuring how long he would live, and the men spread out through the street, lanterns glowing like fireflies around a grave, and when Elias stepped out into the open, coat buttoned, hat low, revolver unseen but ready, time itself seemed to slow, because legends don't rush, they let the world move first, and someone shouted for him to kneel. Someone else fired a warning shot that shattered a window, and that was when Elias finally spoke loud enough for all of Red Hollow to hear, his voice steady, carrying weight, saying, "Go home," and laughter answered him, nervous laughter, until the first shot came not from Elias but from a rooftop, a rifle round screaming past his head, and in that instant the old marksman returned, muscle memory taking command, his hand moving with terrifying calm, drawing, firing, reholstering in one seamless breath. The sound sharp and final, and the rifle clattered off the roof as its owner screamed. Wounded but alive, because Elias had aimed to disable, not kill, reminding himself he was not the man he once was, but the street erupted into chaos anyway, bullets flying, horses rearing, men shouting, and Elias moved like a ghost between lantern light and shadow, every shot of his finding its purpose, hands hit, guns dropped, legs buckled, never lethal, always precise. And the townsfolk watched from behind doors and windows, jaws slack, realizing they were witnessing something impossible. Something no ordinary man could do, and the bartender fell to his knees whispering a name he hadn't said since childhood, Elias Crow, because he had recognized the rhythm, the spacing, the mercy mixed with terror, and Cole Branson stood frozen in the middle of it all, watching his men fall one by one, not dead but broken in spirit, until only he and Elias remained, the street eerily quiet again, dust drifting like smoke from a battlefield, and Cole raised his revolver with shaking hands, shouting that Elias was a murderer, a relic who should have stayed buried, and Elias met his eyes across the distance, seeing not a monster but a boy spoiled by fear and power, and he said, "I buried myself so boys like you wouldn't have to meet men like me," and for a moment, just a moment, Cole hesitated, because deep down every bully knows when he has met something greater, but pride pulled the trigger anyway, and Elias fired once, the bullet snapping Cole's gun clean in half, sending it spinning into the dirt, and Cole collapsed, sobbing now, broken completely, and Elias approached him slowly, kneeling, placing a hand on his shoulder, saying words no one expected from a legend of death, "Live better," before standing and walking away as the town emerged into the street, silent, ashamed, and changed. And if this story is gripping your heart, reminding you that true strength is restraint and real power is control, then subscribe to the channel right now, because stories like this keep the legends alive and the lessons even stronger.